Come on, come on, come on, let me show you what it's all about. Reading and writing, arithmetic, all the matches on the learning tree. Listen with Bob, let me tell you, girl. Education ain't complete. Teach, just gonna show you how to get it in. Tell me, listen to me, baby, that's all you gotta do.
Welcome to Leonard's Language Lessons. And today we will be doing our writing lesson number 1. Our learning targets for today will be I can, recall terms and rules associated with writing, and I can list the characteristics a group of words must possess to be considered a sentence. To get started, I want you to think about what is the smallest unit of our language? Words. A word is a unit of language consisting of one or more spoken sounds or their written representation that functions as a principal carrier of meaning. Think about our language. We have to use the most basic unit of language in order to make bigger parts of our language. Words are classified as one of the 8 parts of speech based on how they function in a sentence. They will either be nouns, pronouns, adjectives, verbs, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, or interjections. Let's do a basic review of the parts of speech. I bet you could tell me that a noun names a person, place, thing, or idea. A pronoun is going to be a word that replaces a noun. Adjectives are going to be words that describe or modify a noun or pronoun. Verbs are going to show action or state of being. Adverbs are going to modify a verb, adjective, or another adverb. Prepositions show the relationship of a noun or pronoun to another word. A conjunction connects or joins words or groups of words. And an interjection expresses emotion. Now that we have a basic understanding of words, we will advance to groups of words. Which group of words is bigger than a word? So we want you to think. Word was the most basic unit of our language. I want you to think a little bigger. It's a phrase, that's right. A phrase is a group of words that often functions as a single part of speech and does not have both a subject and a verb. So think about the illustration that we used for a word was one little puzzle piece, and now we've got 2 puzzle pieces together because it gets a little bit bigger and they have groups of words working together as one unit. Now, which group of words is bigger than a phrase? Again, we started off with word, we went to phrase, now get a little bigger. Do you know what it's called? A clause, that's right. Not a Santa Claus, but a clause that is a group of words that contains both a subject and a verb. So a phrase and a clause are both a group of words, but the difference is a phrase does not have both a subject and a verb, but a clause does. So again, look at the illustration here. We started off small. A word was 1 puzzle piece. A phrase is 2 puzzle pieces. And then a clause is like 3 puzzle pieces. Building and getting bigger and bigger as we go. There are 2 types of clauses. One of them is called a dependent clause. A dependent clause is a group of words that contains both a subject and a verb, but it does not make sense standing alone. Think of what the word dependent means. If you are dependent on your parents, you are not able to live on your own. You have to live in their household. Similarly, a dependent clause cannot stand alone because it does not have all of the characteristics in order to do so. On the other hand, an independent clause is going to be a group of words that contains both a subject and a verb, and it does make sense standing alone. So, of course, independent is going to be the opposite of dependent because it can stand alone. It has all three of the characteristics necessary to stand alone. Now, most people use the term sentence instead of independent clause. However, the two terms are synonyms, and we do need to be familiar with both terms. A sentence has the same definition as independent clause. A sentence is a group of words that contains both a subject and a verb and makes sense standing alone. Now, what characteristics must a group of words possess in order to be considered a sentence? If you were listening on the last slide, we told all three characteristics, and that's actually one thing you should be able to do by the end of today's lesson. In order to be considered a sentence, a group of words must have a subject, have a predicate or a verb, and it must make sense standing alone. You must have all three of those or it's not considered a sentence. Now, if you'll think critically and think about what we've studied about conventions and the rules of conventions, what additional characteristics must a group of words possess in order to be considered a sentence? I'll give you a few hints. First of all, let's look at our pictures down at the bottom. And second of all, I want you to think of the beginning of a sentence, and I want you to think of the end of a sentence. Got it? You should have been able to answer. It must have a capital letter at the beginning, and it must have an end punctuation mark at the end. So, all in all, we need about 5 characteristics for a group of words to have in order to be considered a sentence. Subject, verb, makes sense standing alone. Additionally, we also need to capitalize it and punctuate it correctly. Now, in order to check whether or not a group of words is a sentence, we must know the definition of a subject and a predicate and how to identify them. What do you know about subjects and predicates? Have you heard of them before? Do you know any special facts about them? Did you maybe study them in elementary school? Let's begin with subject. The subject tells whom or what the sentence is about. Some other important characteristics of a subject are: the subject is usually a noun or a pronoun, and the subject is usually located near the beginning of the sentence. Now, a predicate is going to tell something about the subject. The predicate must contain a verb, and the predicate is usually located behind the subject and or near the end of the sentence. Now, you have to beware of special cases. Sometimes it's hard to distinguish what is the subject, where is it, where's the verb, and do they agree? So, some things you want to be aware of, it would be compound subjects. That's when you have more than one subject together. Indefinite pronouns as subjects. Sometimes you're able to tell how many or what you're referring to. Subjects and verbs that might be interrupted by certain words or phrases. Special types of sentences like interrogative or exclamatory sentences, and even sentences that might have weird constructions or arrangements, like sentences that begin with the words here or possibly with the word there. It is important to be able to identify the subject and the verb of a sentence to ensure subject-verb agreement. I'm hoping that as I said that, you were doing your hand motion to show that your hands agree, just like a subject and a verb would agree. Now, when it's difficult to find the subject, try to find the verb first. Then ask who or what, and that should lead you to the subject. For example, in the following sentence, the hero rescued the crowd. Maybe you can't decide whether the subject is hero or crowd, but you do think you know that the verb is rescued. Well, ask yourself, who or what rescued? Not who was rescued, but who did the rescuing. The answer is hero. Therefore, the subject of this sentence is hero. Now, how can we apply this knowledge? When we write, we must make sure that we use complete sentences. That's in language arts class, reading, math, social studies. Anytime that you need to write something out, write an answer, you need to use complete sentences. And when we write sentences, we must make sure that we do so properly. The way we do that, we need to make sure that they possess the necessary characteristics. And those main three characteristics are, it has to have a subject, has to have a verb, and it must make sense standing alone. And of course we know, don't forget to capitalize and punctuate. Let's see if we can identify what our learning targets are and see if we have mastered them. Can we say that we can recall terms and rules associated with writing? For example, could you tell me what a subject is? Maybe could you tell me what a verb is? Or could you tell me what a word, phrase, clause, or maybe what's the difference between a dependent and an independent clause? You should be able to tell me those by the end of the lesson. And then also, the most important part would be, can you list the characteristics a group of words must possess in order to be considered a sentence? And we said there were three main things, but we could add 5. So let's see if you can do it with me right now. A group of words must have a subject, have a verb, and it must make sense standing alone. And as we write it, can't forget to use a capital letter at the beginning and an end punctuation mark at the end. Thank you for listening to our writing lesson number 1.